Alright, YouTube, we are back here on our Note 2 project. What we're going to do next is go ahead and re-adhere our newly put in digitizer and LCD to the mid-frame. We're going to be using some of this 3M double-sided tape. I have a couple different sizes, a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner. We have our pieces here that we need to be using, which is our home button cables. We have our home button itself, the housing as well. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and put the housing pieces back in the trim. One thing to do to make this stick a little bit easier is to put some of this 3M double-sided tape on the actual button itself. So we'll go ahead and start with the home button housing. Let's cut a little piece to fill to the sides so that are sticking out. Remember, the thin side always goes up, and the longer, the kind of the fatter side goes down when you're installing this back into your phone. You want to make sure that you put this in correctly. And you don't want to be busting another piece of glass or an LCD after you've spent all this time to fix it. Now that's done. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to our speaker grill here as well. Make sure that we get this to adhere nicely. So using this little thin 3M tape, we'll just go ahead and cut this to fit. A little bit thinner side here. And the same goes here as well. The side that has the longer flange is going to go up away from the LCD, and the smaller flange is going to go down towards the LCD when you put this back together. So make sure you put these in the right direction. So both of our kind of the metal housings here have the double-sided tape. Go ahead and just remove the sticker backing off of it, and we can go ahead and adhere it into our piece of glass here. There's our last piece. We'll go ahead and put this in. Like I was saying, the part with the longer flange goes down, shorter flange goes up. Go ahead and just stick this back in there. Make sure it's nice and snug into the glass piece. Alright. Next thing I'm going to do is do the same thing with our speaker grill here. Put this back into the glass. Just make sure it's nice and adherent. Again, the longer flange goes away from the LCD, and the shorter flange goes towards the LCD. Alright, with that done, go ahead and set that aside. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and tape this back up so we can re-adhere our LCD to it. Now this thin metal backing here, this fabric tape, if it's lost its adhesive stick, which this one has, which can happen as you're pulling it up from with the playing cards, we're going to go ahead and remove this tape. And what we're going to do is just replace it with some double-sided 3M rubberized tape that we got. Let's pull that away. The same thing down this side. We have a little bit of piece of tape here. Just kind of clean up all of the fabric junk that's underneath it. If you need to use a little bit of alcohol to do so, feel free. Won't be hurting anything on your bezel at this point. Just kind of rub it off here. Use a scraper tool to get it to pop up. Just cleaning it up a little bit and make sure that there's no ridges or bumps. One of the goals of this is you want to make sure there's no residue left behind on this midframe. You don't want to need any of the distortion that would come from being pressed down behind your LCD. The S Pen mat on this one will actually pick up a little bit of it, but spending all this time to replace and re-glue your LCD down. So we're going to use a little bit thicker tape here. This is actually, I believe it's a 5mm thick 3M tape. And we're going to use this to replace the fabric tape that we had used behind the LCD. And like we're talking about, we don't want a lot of distortions. We need to give it a nice, good base. So starting from the top of where the tape was, and the tape didn't go all the way to the top, it stopped a little short. And we'll use our razor blade or scissors to cut this to fit the right length here. It doesn't have to be perfect underneath here, as the goal is to give it a little bit of the LCD a standoff from the frame. Again, looking at the back to see how long the sticker is here. So it's about the same length. It's a little bit longer on this side. We'll just cut this to fit again. We'll put I missed a little bit. I'll just use this razor blade to cut it nice and flat here. And you don't want any tape running at the side of it as well, as it's a pretty snug fit for the LCD, so make sure everything's nice and flush and sitting flat. Do a lengthwise strip of tape here. And do one at the bottom. Alright, we're just going to put a couple additional strips down the side here to make sure there's no flex in the LCD as you're pressing on it. Definitely don't want any distortion. Make sure you don't overlap your tape as well. You don't need any ridges underneath here. Just going to put in a little bit more, one at the top up here, and then one in the middle on the other side. Alright, now we have a good base for the LCD to be put back in. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use this thinner 1mm 3M rubberized tape to go around the outside of the phone and the frame. Now, if you bought a new assembly, then really what you could do is, normally it comes with some tape for this. It's already cut out. You could just use that. To save myself some money, I didn't buy the new assembly. I just bought the glass and used that LOCA repair. So we'll have to make our own. You can buy the frame pre-cut off of eBay if you want to save yourself some time, but it only takes 3 or 4 minutes to do. It's not anything too crazy. Now, as we're putting the tape on here, we want to make sure that none of the tape sits inset on the inside of the bezel. You want to have it actually sticking out on the outside, overlapping on the outside. That way the LCD fits in nice and snug, but you don't have any problems getting it to sit flush inside of the frame. You want to make sure as you do this that you don't get the actual tape inside of any of the actual frame itself, because you have to put your home buttons in, the front-facing camera, all of the items that have to sit within the actual inset holes. So make sure you don't cover any of those. Only put it on the outside portion of the frame. Put it all the way across the bottom here. Making sure that all pieces are covered and that I can get this adhesive tape onto outside of the frame. Making sure that everything sits flat and nothing overlaps. Perfect. Go ahead and start taping the top here. In some places up here we can use a little bit thicker tape as the frame's a little bit wider. Make sure we don't cover up any of the camera holes anywhere in here. Make sure we don't cover up in the proximity sensor. One thing to be aware of here as well is you don't want to put any of the double-sided tape on where the speaker grill will sit up in between the two little nubs that it sits onto. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put our home key back in. with our two backlit keys here as well. Now sometimes there's enough double-sided residue here, you can just stick it on here and it stays flush. If that's not the case, what you can do is use a little bit of 3M double-sided tape and put that on there and make it stick nice and flat. Get it nice and flush on the way it goes through here. You can flip it over and then put this side of the ribbon cable down. Make sure it stays nice and flush. Definitely don't want it to come apart as we're putting our glass back on. So if you seem a little bit unsure, if you don't think it's going to stay, just cut a little tiny piece of the double-sided 3M tape and use it on one side of the buttons to help keep it nice and flush. Put it right on either side of the home key. Go ahead and pull off the backing here. And in some cases, if it's not sticking here as well, you can do the exact same thing. Just use a little bit of 3M double-sided tape and adhere it down right here as well. Put this down and make sure it stays nice and snug. Make sure that the tape isn't sitting inside of the frame. Always, if it's going to overlap, you want it to hang off of the frame on the outside. Go ahead and start peeling it off. Making sure that it doesn't ripple anywhere, that it sits nice and flush all the way around. Alright, so all the way on the outside looks good. Go ahead and take off the tape that's sitting on the inside of the bezel here. Just double check our home button here real fast. Put a little double-sided tape on here, make sure that it sits nice and snug to the button. Just on one of the little flange sides. Save you a lot of time when you start trying to put the glass back on. The home button keeps falling out. You want to make sure that it sits on there nice and snug. Didn't really want to work out for me, so we'll try a different method here and put it on the side of the flanges here in the phone itself rather than on the button. Just being very careful not to cut the ribbon cable, only cutting the tape. Alright. Go ahead and keep removing the tape as we go. The home button can be a real pain, so I would suggest taking the time just to put some tape on here, see if you can't keep it down. Remove the inner strips here all along the sides. Alright. It's a little tedious to tape the frame, but taking the time to make sure that all the sides are covered will save you a lot more time as you start putting the phone back together. Definitely don't want to put it all the way together, put all this work in the LCD and just have it start prying up and pulling away from the frame in a day or two, or when it gets hot out in the sun. So taking this little extra few steps here can help save you some time. Putting the home button, making sure that the little round nubs where the home button is supposed to sit go back into the home button itself. Just not having a lot of luck with this wanting to sit flush, so we'll go ahead and try it, putting it in the LCD. and then putting that down. Try that out and see if that works a little bit better for us. Also, one last thing that we're going to do is just put a little bit of sticky tape on the back side of the circuit board here. Make sure it sits nice and flush. As we start inserting this back into the phone, we don't want to have it keep prying up. Save us a little bit of time, as it was actually taped down to the mid frame, which is something that I'm not going to do. Making sure that all of that LOCA glue is nice and cleaned off here before you start putting this back in. Sometimes it can seep back out, so making sure it's nice and cleaned off before we start applying it to the mid frame. Making sure that both of the ribbon cables pop through the sides. We're going to go around and just press onto the LCD. We want to start with the LCD, make sure it sits nice and snug inside of the actual mid frame, and then going around the edges and making sure that it sticks down. Now, I've tried a few different methods for applying this. I like the tape method easier because if anything goes wrong, you can go back and technically remove it. Checking the home button, make sure that functions as well. The other thing that I've done in the past is I've used some silicone glue like goop, and just use a couple of C-clamps, putting that in the corners, a little bit down the side of it, and clamping it so it sits nice and snug. I would refrain from using things like super glue. I have used those in the past, and they can work, but also they are a little bit brittle, so if you drop the phone, it can pop off. So if you're going to use super glue, I suggest you use it in conjunction with tape, or you use it in conjunction with the glue silicone. This looks like it's pretty snug. We're just going to put it nice and flat, making sure that our speaker grill here sits flush onto the frame. It does protrude just a little bit like it should, but making sure that it sits flat on top of the little knobs that are at the top that are set out for it. Making sure our home button works, and it looks good. Alright, we're making serious progress in our Note 2 LOCA repair. The next thing that we have to do is go ahead and just reassemble the back of this phone, put the logic board back in, the cameras, all of that stuff. So go ahead and click the link below. That'll take you to the finishing reassembly video. If you found this to be helpful or useful, go ahead and like it. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you on the next video.